On the 21st, the emperor felt less well than the previous day. He sent Count de Montauban, who had spent several hours with him, to get some fresh air and summon the doctor, and then Father Vignali. He told the former that shaving had tired him and his strength was abandoning him, and then turning to Father Vignali, he said, "Do you know what a mortuary chamber is?" "Yes, sire." "Have you ever served in one?" "Never, sire." "Well, you will serve in mine when I am in the throes of death. You shall have an altar erected in the adjoining room. Expose the Holy Sacrament there and recite the prayers of the dying. I was born in the Catholic religion. I wish to fulfill the duties it imposes and receive the assistance it administers." The scene was quite moving. The emperor was about to continue when, turning to Dr. Antomarchi standing at the foot of the bed, he thought he noticed some trace of amusement on his face. Offended by what he called a lack of heart, he said to him, "Your foolishness tires me, sir. I can forgive your frivolity and your lack of good manners, but a lack of heart? Never. Leave." Then he said to the priest, "When I am dead, I shall be placed in the funeral chapel. You shall celebrate Mass and not cease praying until I am placed in the ground." The emperor fell silent. The priest and I remained under the impact of the scene that had just taken place when the emperor banished the stillness. He talked to the priest about Corsica, Ponte Nuovo, and Rostino, telling him he should build a house there. The emperor took pleasure in describing a happy, peaceful life for his future there, implying he would grant him the means to realize the dreams he had just spoken of. Moved by the emperor's affectionate kindness, Father Vignali knelt and seized the emperor's hand that was lying on the side of the bed. He pressed it to his lips and arose again, his eyes full of tears. After the emperor had dismissed him, he told me that poor Vignali's heart is stricken with sorrow, seeing me my condition. I like his character. It is that of a Corsican child. As for that imbecile, he is hardly worth my concern. Has anyone ever been cared for worse than I by him? I did not reply, but I thought the emperor would continue to be angry that his habitual spirit of generosity, which led him to forgive, would not falter in the case of Dr. Antomarchi. I was not mistaken. The emperor's conversation with Father Vignali, although it was the first one I heard of this nature, did not surprise me. With the same calm with which he had just tended to this mundane affair, the emperor, feeling his last hour approaching, wanted as a Christian to also put things in order for eternity. I had heard the emperor proclaim the existence of God and say that religious feeling was such a consolation and that it was of great benefit to possess it. On the 22nd, the emperor agreed to take a sedative administered by Dr. Arnott, who came alone. The emperor said he had a fever, and placing his hand on his stomach said, "It is there, doctor. Nothing goes through anymore. The pylorus is affected. I feel it." The little food he ate was vomited during the evening. The Grand Marshal, who remained alone with him, spoke of Dr. Antomarchi's regret that the emperor held such reprehensible feelings toward him. He felt the emperor's state of health should not allow him to worry about such things. "What am I to do?" the emperor said. "He may not possess a bad soul, but he is an imbecile." No doubt, during the night, Count de Montauban and the Grand Marshal pleaded in his favor, as he received the order to return for the next day's visit, along with Dr. Arnott. The emperor had signed all the inventories shown him, yet there remained the inventory of the snuff boxes to be done. He asked me to bring the case containing them, and dictated the listing to me in the absence of Count de Montauban. He put aside one decorated with a very fine cameo for Lady Holland. This box had been given to him by Pius VI after the Treaty of Tolentino. He wrote on a card, "Napoleon to Lady Holland," as a token of esteem and affection. He asked Count de Montauban to give it to her, expressing his gratefulness to her for the care she and her husband had shown him. He also took out one intended for Dr. Arnott and told Count de Montauban to add 12,000 francs in gold to it. This box had originally been intended for the minister, who had accompanied Cipriani to his final resting place. It was adorned with a crest. The emperor, while telling me to have an N engraved on it, made one with the tip of his scissors instead. "Sire," I said, "when its origin is known, this one will be far more precious than any with other engravings." At the emperor's death, it was given to Dr. Arnott by Count de Montauban. Once that inventory was completed, the emperor asked me what items remained with Count de Turenne. I went up to my room, found the inventory, and gave it to him. He made arrangements for these things, as can be seen on inventories 1, 2, and 3. He also told me what I was to do with his hair that would be cut after his death. You shall give each of my family members a locket with some of my hair, a bracelet for the empress, and a watch chain for my son. That day was certainly one of the most tiring for the emperor during his long illness, and one of the saddest for us because of the rapidly developing symptoms announcing his imminent end. The morning had been spent writing his codicils. Although he was extremely tired, he had me sit next to his bed so he could dictate the official instructions for his executors. Instructions I recopied, and which he signed on the 26th after reading them over. During this work, he was seized with vomiting spells, forcing him to suspend his dictation for a few minutes each time, but everything I said to urge him to cease this work that brought about such serious consequences was unable to deter him. I am tired indeed, he said, but little time remains for me and I must finish. Give me a bit of the Las Casas Constance wine. I dared remind him of the effect it had produced a few days ago. Bah, he said, a drop could not possibly do me harm, and shrugging his shoulders, all of them know nothing about it. Everything is lacking in this country. What do you want me to wait for? I wish to do nothing to shorten my days, but I certainly will do nothing to extend them. Take this, he said, handing me the little glass in which the Constance wine was. It's like a razor blade cutting into me as it slides down. After such a long dictation, he still wanted to personally close the 3 boxes containing his snuff boxes, whose inventory he had dictated, and in which some other objects were placed. He wrapped them up with ribbons, sealed them with his crest, and handed me the keys, making me their trustee. The Constance wine did not take long to induce vomiting, but this did not prevent him from continuing his work until the Grand Marshal and the doctors were announced. When they came in, the room contained torn papers and sealed boxes wrapped in blue ribbons. I have written too much, he said to Dr. Arnott. I am tired and my abdomen is cramped. He took little food, dismissed the doctors after a moment, and kept Count Bertrand with him. Countess Bertrand came to inquire about the emperor's health, as she had not seen him since he had taken ill. She let me see all the anguish she felt over this. I spoke of it to the emperor, who replied that one day, when he was shaved, he would receive her. The same day, the emperor told Count Bertrand he wished to be buried along the banks of the Seine, otherwise on an island at the junction of the Rhone and the Saône, near Lyon, or finally in Corsica in the cathedral where his ancestors were buried, because he would still be in France there. But he said the British government will have anticipated my death. In the event, instructions have been given that my body not leave the island, which I doubt. Have me buried under the shade of the willows, where I have rested at times when I went to see you at Hut's Gate, near the fountain where they go for my water every day. These words, spoken with so much calm and resignation, implied the possibility of abandonment on this accursed rock, which wrenched the soul. He also said that he had restored religion in France, that in his palaces, as in St. Helena, he had attended Mass on Sunday, and that he wanted his last days to be in accordance with the balance of his life. Father Vignali would say Mass and recite the 40-hour prayers, and when he did so, he was to be left alone with him. That evening, his stomach was not able to keep down what he had eaten during the day. Nature had sustained the emperor's energy enough to allow him to settle his affairs. On April 26th, he felt calmer and wanted to use that day to finish them entirely. During the 4 o'clock visit the preceding day, Dr. Arnott took his pulse and stated that it was rather weak. Afterwards, he offered his arm to Dr. Antomarchi, which he had not done for several days, and gave each of them a piece of biscuit. He offered some claret to Dr. Arnott and dismissed them, saying, I will see you tomorrow. On the 27th, the emperor shaved in bed, and I hoped he would summon Countess Bertrand. He said that he felt refreshed, but thought he looked very unwell. He was in a good mood of sorts, chatted with Count de Montalon, and seemed satisfied with what he had accomplished in the previous days. He called for Dr. Antomarchi and acted friendly toward him, which delighted me. During the prior visits, having had the opportunity to note the regret on his face, he asked him if Dr. Arnott would be satisfied with the sum of 12,000 francs for the care he had given him. You shall be pleased with what I do for you. And a moment later he added, I shall leave you 100,000 francs, and if you so desire, I shall write you a recommendation to the Empress. Before retiring, the doctor expressed his profound appreciation to the emperor. During the day, hot towels were applied to his feet to bring back the warmth they lacked. At 4 o'clock, he received the doctor's visit, told Count de Montholon to come back at 8, and said the same to the Grand Marshal when he left at 6. The emperor had eaten almost nothing and had gone back to bed after the doctors departed. At 8:30, the emperor went from his bed to his armchair, leaning heavily on myself and Saint-Denis. He had the carafes removed from his table and told me to place his covered lamp, writing kit, and some paper there. Various sealed packages were on the dresser, and he told me to give them to him and to request the presence of Count de Montholon and Father Vignali. The Grand Marshal soon arrived. The emperor, showing him the packages on his table, told him to draw up a statement and to place our signatures and seals under his own on each of the codicils and the will, as he had done himself. It read as follows. St. Helena, April 27th, 1821. Statement establishing the existence of the Emperor's will and codicils. On this day, April 27th, 1821, at 9 p.m., we, Count Bertrand, Grand Marshal of the Emperor Napoleon, in execution of his orders, had presented us his various wills, codicils, and instructions in the care of Monsieur Marchand. These number 9 separate envelopes or packages, all having approximately the same shape with different thicknesses, folded in one of the 4 corners, 3 of them attached together with a red ribbon. All packages bear the emperor's signature and are sealed with his crest and bear the signatures of Count Bertrand, Count de Montholon, Monsieur Marchand, and Father Vignali. After we were shown 3 mahogany chests locked with a key, wrapped with green ribbons, and sealed with the imperial coat of arms and those of the 4 people designated above, namely Count Bertrand, Count de Montholon, Monsieur Marchand, and Father Vignali, we have read the notes written in the Emperor Napoleon's own hand, and we have transcribed them as follows. On an envelope bearing no number is written, "This is my will, written in my own hand, signed Napoleon." On envelope number 1, it is written, "This is a codicil to my will, written entirely in my own hand, signed Napoleon." On envelope number 2 is written, "This is a second codicil to my will, written entirely in my own hand, signed Napoleon." On an envelope with no number is written, "This is a third codicil to my will, written entirely in my own hand, signed and sealed with my crest, to be opened the same day and immediately after the opening of my will, signed Napoleon." On envelope number 5 is written, "This is my codicil, or statement of my last wishes, whose execution I trust to my very beloved wife, Empress Marie Louise, signed Napoleon." On envelope number 6 is written, "This is my codicil, or statement of my last wishes, whose execution I trust to my son, Eugène Napoleon." It is written entirely in my own hand, signed Napoleon. On an envelope with no number is written, "This is a set of instructions for my executors, Montholon, Bertrand, and Marchand. I have written a will and 7 codicils, of which Marchand is the trustee, signed Napoleon. On the orders of the Emperor Napoleon, we, Count Bertrand, his Grand Marshal, have drawn up the present draft to serve as inventory and minutes, executed in the Emperor's bedroom at Longwood on the day and date stated above. Signed Count Bertrand." When this statement was completed, he dismissed these gentlemen a few minutes later and kept only Father Vignali with him. Shortly afterwards, he came out. I went into the emperor's room and found him in bed. He handed me his will, his codicils, and the draft drawn on Monsieur Lafitte, instructing me to hand all this after his death only to Count de Montholon, in the presence of Count Bertrand and Father Vignali. I locked everything in the travel kit where the necklace the emperor had given me was, and I remained with him until Count de Montholon arrived, which on this day was only at 11 o'clock. On seeing him, the emperor said, "Well, my son, wouldn't it be a shame not to die after having settled my affairs so well?" "Sire, only your majesty could have such a thought," replied the general. I retired in order to leave him alone with the emperor. The emperor had ordered me to take to Count de Montholon's house that evening his manuscripts in the box containing what he called his reserve, which he had disposed of in one of his codicils, to Count Bertrand's house, the weapons, and to my quarters, the travel kit, as well as the 3 mahogany cases holding his snuff boxes. After such a busy day, with so much effort being expended, the night was bound to be a restless one, and it was indeed. The emperor tried to sleep, but to no avail. The 28th began badly. His strength was failing before our eyes, and his feet had become permanently cold. A great number of hot towels restored a little warmth. The emperor asked Saint-Denis, who brought them to me, how his child was. You must be very tired from sitting up with me so much, my boy. How is Novaras today? He has really been afflicted by his illness. We replied that he was feeling better and his convalescence was about to begin. The previous day, the doctors in Count Bertrand had insisted that the emperor change rooms, saying his 2 bedrooms were not ventilated enough. The emperor disliked change that upset his habits. However, he agreed. Dr. Antomarchi reminded the emperor that he'd promised to take the drawing room as his bedroom. I am willing. Is everything ready? He said, looking at me. Yes, sire, I said. A small camp bed had been placed between the 2 drawing room windows, a folding screen in front of the door, and a small table by the bedside. The emperor, who the preceding day had already felt very weak when he made his way from his bed to his armchair, became even more tired, moving from his bedroom to the drawing room. He got out of bed, put on his bathrobe and slippers, and when he was standing, said, "Poor me, my legs can no longer hold me up." We offered to carry him, but he refused. Supported by Count de Montsalon and myself, he reached the drawing room with great difficulty and climbed into bed. During that trip, leaning heavily on Count de Montsalon, he said to him, "My son, I have no strength left. I am now destitute." As soon as he got into bed, we wrapped his feet in hot towels. We then placed the second camp bed in the corner of the drawing room, near the door connecting with the billiard room, on the same side as the fireplace. The other one, between the 2 windows and facing the fireplace, is the one in which the emperor died. The night of April 28th and 29th, the emperor was unable to sleep. He attributed the insomnia to his apartment change. When I entered his room at 3 o'clock, I found Count de Montsalon writing under his dictation, and I was about to retire when he told me to stay. "Montsalon, my son, go and rest. You have need of it. I'm going to continue with Marchand." I took Monsieur de Montsalon's place, and the emperor told me to entitle his dictation Second Reflection. For an hour and a half, he dictated at great length on the subject of organizing the National Guard in order to defend the territory of France, whose welfare and grandeur were always on his mind. When he finished, he told me to rewrite this neatly and attach it to the one he had dictated to Count de Montsalon, who remained standing by his bed. He said to me, "I was so weak yesterday and so well today that I feel strong enough to go horseback riding." I opened the shutters when daylight arrived. Since he had changed beds during the night and the sunlight hurt his eyes, he asked to move again, which he did with great difficulty, leaning on Saint-Denis and myself. Nature had just granted him a last effort. The 2 dictations were his swan song. It is regrettable they have been lost. Count de Montsalon returned around 11 o'clock. The emperor complained of a little weakness, but he still wanted to add an 8 codicil to his will. His strength soon left him after a few lines. "Poor Napoleon," he said, and unable to remain sitting up in bed, he rested his head on the pillow. The unfinished codicil is worded in this way: "With a sick body, but a sane mind, I am writing in my own hand this 8th codicil to my will. I name as my executors Messieurs Bertrand, Montsalon, and Marchand, and Las Casas, or his younger son, my treasurer. I beg Marie-Louise to take in her service Antomarchi and to pay him a pension of 6,000 francs, which I bequeath to him." The emperor, feeling a little better after this moment of weakness, said to General de Montsalon, "My son, go and get some fresh air. You need it." Before he left, the general took me aside and handed me 2 drafts of letters the emperor had him prepare, one for Monsieur Lafitte and the other for Monsieur de la Bouillerie. He asked me to copy them so that on my return he could present them for the emperor's signature. He feared that if he did not sign them today, he perhaps would not be able to do it tomorrow. The emperor had fallen asleep, and leaving Saint-Denis with him, I went into the library to copy the following 2 letters. "Monsieur Lafitte, I gave you in 1815, at the time I was leaving Paris, a sum close to 6 million, for which you gave me a duplicate receipt. I am assigning Count de Montsalon to present the other receipt to you, so that you may hand over said sum to him after my death, with interest in the amount of 5%, dating from July 1st, 1815, After subtracting the payments you have made based on orders received from me, I wish for the liquidation of my account to be carried out by mutual agreement between you, Count de Montsalon, Calpetrin, and Monsieur Marchand. And once again, this liquidation has been completed. I hereby give you full and complete release for said sum. I also give you a box containing my medals, and I entreat you to give these to Count de Montsalon. As this letter has no other purpose, I pray to God, Monsieur Lafitte, to keep you in his holy care. Longwood, Island of St. Helena, April 25th, 1821. Napoleon. Here is the other. Baron de la Bouillerie, Treasury of my private estate. I request that you provide an accounting in the amount to Count de Montsalon after my death, whom I'm charging with the execution of my will. As this letter has no other purpose, I pray to God, Baron de la Bouillerie, to keep you in his holy care. Longwood, April 25th, 1821. Napoleon.